Happy New Year and welcome to Kicking Match. We are an Irish League podcast which comes at you weekly, almost as regularly as a weather-related match postponement, except I come with more jokes about plastic pitches. It's 2023 and plenty of things have changed. Portadown have signed half a new team and, actually not a lot has changed so far. They're still blowtorching Shamrock Park. Coleraine haven't really conceded. The Reds still look pretty stout at home, and Glentoran are still in that yin phase in response to the yang of their earlier season form. Perhaps transferring in a few new players could fix things, yeah, maybe. Well, let's talk about the games that happened, and maybe we'll have a natter about players who could be swapping shirts very soon. Here we are for the first new pod of 2023. Hopefully nothing has really changed. I feel like I should be saying welcome back, but like the league, I didn't really go anywhere. I had lots of fun podcasts coming out during the festive period. I hope you had a good time, got a little bit of chillage, got to a few games if you could. I know I had a good one as I was able to spend so much time eating chocolate. I was able to even rank my favourite celebrations from worst to last, and Twix is the worst. We know that. But there was great games. There's lots of fun things to talk about. It's January. There's transfers. There's games and all those things. And here to help me decipher all the good bits is definitely the Mars bar of my little selection box today. He is the incredibly experienced sports editor of the Coleraine Chronicle. He is also one half of the Coleraine FC podcast. Make some noise in the bus, car, or kitchen for the formidable Damian Mullan. Great to chat to you, Damian.
And likewise, Peter, and a happy new year to you and to all your podcast listeners as well. I hope everybody had a suitably relaxing festive break.
Thank you very much. I feel like I've now got to that age where feeling a wee bit tired on the 2nd of January, I was wondering, was it the flu or is age now catching up with me from some of my indiscretions? But I was there. I caught 2 games of football, as did yourself in your line of work. What a great time to come onto this podcast. Usually I'm a scud for people who are following their team. Not for you. Your team are in their form of the season. They walk out of Windsor with a 0-0 draw. Is it as exciting as it seems to be from the sides?
Yeah, yes and no, Peter, I suppose would be the answer to that question. I don't think, in fact, I know nobody is getting too excited round Coleraine way. We had the team had a bit of an indifferent spell earlier in the season, which means really that they're in effect playing a lot of catch up here. I'm looking at the table. Coleraine, despite being one of the informed teams, as you said, in the Premiership, are still in 5th place, some way off the leaders. So when you say getting excited, I think probably we've been down this road 1 or 2 times before following Coleraine, and Oran Kearney, our manager, I think we all take our lead from him, and he always goes by the adage, they never get too carried away when they win, and they never get too deflated or down when they lose. So I think that's kind of where we are at the moment. We're quite happy to be sitting in 5th place. We're definitely in great form. We're not conceding goals, which is, if you don't concede goals, you're always going to have a chance in games. And Monday's result, and probably more the performance against Linfield at Windsor Park, was something that I think a lot of fans and everybody around the club took a great deal of pride from, because supporters like myself turned up at Windsor to be greeted with the news that 3 of what you would say are your key players were missing through a combination of injury and illness. We didn't expect, or we didn't hope for a lot, and the performance that the guys did then put on and was roundly well applauded by the 900 or so Korean fans in the North Stand. So from that point of view, all in all, a great day and one to savour, and a point at Windsor Park and a scoreless draw at that is always one to savour.
You Coleraine ones are awfully coy about this team. I have been giving you your roses at times this season because Right now, you're looking tight at the back, but you're also looking so free-flowing up top. You're super dynamic in midfield. In Shevlin, you have a player who can pick the ball out of the air or dance around any defender. You've really got it all. And yes, you had that middle little patch where things weren't looking great, and it looks as though in the middle of the table was where you were going to languish, because at the start of 2022, I went through the results, and beating the top six sides was a real Achilles heel. Right now, it's not exactly your speciality, but when you're not conceding goals against anybody and you're knocking them in for fun, everything must feel great. And particularly when you have all these players in form, particularly like some McKendry must think, if I hit this, this is going in. That's just the air of confidence they seem to have right now.
I would agree to a certain extent, but as I said to you, following Coleraine over this last 5 or 6 years, you look back and you probably speak to the players. I mean, I would speak to the players on various times in my podcast and stuff, and they will look back and they probably, in their heart of hearts, think that they should have had a league title by now. There was a couple of years where they came so tantalizingly close to winning the league and they never quite made it. And I think because of that nobody wants to even think or dream about winning a league, because we've been so close in the past and we've fallen short, and we don't want to be sort of leaving ourselves open to that kind of heartbreak again. And I think also when you look in the summer, last summer as it is now, Coleraine had to sort of undergo a bit of a, by their standards, quite a major overhaul of players. 5-6 years, Coleraine had a consistent core squad of players. And watching the team last year, even as supporters, we all could see that change was needed. And Oren and the management team took the brave decision last summer to overhaul the team. I think Oren, by Oren's own admission, there was maybe 10 players out and 10 or 11 new players come in. And with that, Peter, I think everybody was expecting a little bit. It was going to take time. You can't expect such an overhaul of players, so many new players to come in, and for everybody to hit the ground running immediately. And I think it has taken up until really the last couple of weeks, where the team has now found a rhythm where players are more comfortable about what their roles are and what their jobs are. And with that in mind, I get what you're saying, and I would agree with you that if they continue along the same lines, second half of the season, yes, they could very much be a team to watch.
Let's dip into the game, because you just go to Windsor Park. It's really the battle between the informed Linfield against this immovable defence that you guys have. But we all heard it if we're hearing the build up to the game. There's slight drama in the sense that illness means that a few of your team are out. Not ideal when you go to the National Stadium looking to get a result that could not kickstart, but could be a real nice little slick piece towards a fantastic end of the season. You go in, tell us a story. What's going on in the lead up to kickoff?
When you go there and you hear that Gareth Dean is missing, Conor McDermott is missing, one of our players of the year, Josh Carson, Mr. Dependability, just signed a new contract extension at the club. To be greeted with that news, immediately your hopes for a good result take a bit of a setback. Then you recover from that, and then you think, right, okay, this is an opportunity. It's the old cliche. It's an opportunity for guys coming into the team to step up, to make a sort of name for themselves, to show what they're capable of doing. And that's exactly what happened over the course of the game. Marty Gallagher came in, and Marty is again, Mr. Dependable. He's number 2 to Gareth Dean in terms of goalkeeping at the club. Maybe comes in for a few games if Gareth is unavailable or if he's injured. And never once has Marty Gallagher let us down. And he did it again on Monday, and he produced 2 saves, which reserved the point for Coleraine. There was one, I think it was a save from a header in the first half, and then a second one with his foot from Fortynan in the second half. And it just shows you it's not about the first 11, Peter. As you know, in football, it's a squad game. And I think Lee Lynch came in as well. And Stephen O'Donnell, the Coleraine captain, actually singled Lee Lynch out afterwards for special praise, and basically said that somebody like Lee Lynch, who, as we all, like football fans, we associate him being a skillful player and an attacking player and wanting to play in the final third. But Stephen O'Donnell rightly pointed out that Lee Lynch, for large parts of the Linfield game, was back defending in his own half, putting in a shift for the team. And that's what the guys had to do. And that, I think, speaks volumes about guys stepping up and doing a role for the team. But as for the game itself, anybody that was there would quite happily tell you that Linfield had the better chances, probably on the basis of play, could and should have scored. And another day they would have got the 3 points. But I think Coleraine fully deserved a point, a share of the spoils for a superb defensive display and for the work that they put in on what was a very, very difficult pitch.
And you had to keep out the hottest striker in the league right now in Vertainen. It's a lot of the question answered, really. I think a lot of outsiders were looking on this run that was bubbling underneath and thinking, well, when it comes to the big games, what's going to happen? And when I look at the table, you talked about it there, that Coleraine are somewhat coming in from behind. I think you guys like that. I think you'll take that, take the results bit by bit while other people concentrate on others. And I said online that it feels as though this league, with it being so tight, it is going to be those big games because of there being a real clear top six. There's lots of key games, and I think that's why at the minute things are relatively close between those six. I went through it all and I looked who's played who, and I put a little graphic up. And right now, it tells an interesting tale because out of the six in the games played against other top six sides, it's Linfield who is bottom with only 10 points out of the 9 games that they've played. And then goes Cliftonville on 11 points, Coleraine. This is all tight as well. Coleraine on 12, Lawlor on 14, Glentoran on 14. And actually it's Crusaders that are sitting there with 15 points. And there's lots of different stories there about who's been playing at home, who's had great starts, and who's been faltering elsewhere. Clearly with Crusaders, they've been slipping up at the bottom teams rather than the top teams. They've been dealing with the high press situations. And looking through Coleraine, it's not that you've faltered in a lot of the games. It's similar to Linfield. Linfield have had a lot of draws against the top teams. So far, Coleraine have missed out on some big results. I'm thinking of the ones against Crusaders at home, which you then turn them over again later on. But you get a draw against Linfield, the second draw you've had against them this season now, and you'll feel like you're ready to take on anybody because you're coming in from behind. But you look at the fixtures that are coming in the league beyond that. You have Portadown, you have Newry, you have Carrick at home, you have Swifts away, you have Cliftonville in the middle of that. But as January and the next few weeks go, you'll think this is points builder. It's now about dispatching with ease and not blinking.
I know, because I've looked at the league games that are coming up as well. But, Peter, again, football, and it's a cliche for a reason. It's one game at a time. And when you start, as a manager and as a group of players, I guarantee you that Oran and the guys aren't looking any further than this weekend, which happens to be Irish Cup weekend. But they won't look any further than that because it's okay for us guys and supporters to sort of look and to sort of think what can happen, what may happen. But they won't do that because the moment that you do that, you take your eye off the ball, and that's when you drop points maybe to the lower ranked teams with the greatest of respects. But it's interesting what you say about those battles, those games between the top 6 teams. And I've, over the course of a period of time, watching Coleraine, I mean, that was Coreaine's second 0-0 draw against Linfield this year. They played them at the showgrounds in October when it was a really strange game. I mean, there was very few chances. It was a 0-0. And you're watching them now, like a Coleraine and Oran, I don't know if he is or not, but it looks like he's almost sending the team out not to lose the game, almost as opposed to sometimes to go and try to win the game. And whether that's a mindset that maybe that you're referring to there, where if you don't lose and you don't concede points to the ones around you, and then you can take care of business against the so-called lesser teams, then that's maybe over the course of a season that will maybe work in your favour, where you will finish out somewhere out on the top. But I mean, it is interesting that some of those top 6 games, I think Coleraine drew 0-0 with Glentoran as well earlier in the season. gone almost are the days when Coleraine and Linfield or Glens would have a real tear up at each other, and it would end up 3-2-4, whatever. And it's just seems to have changed.
Well, that's the thing. That was the big criticism with a lot of these games. There wasn't actually a lot of these clashes at the start of the season where people prepared for the top six to be the top six that they are. We remember how boring and Lawrence against Glentoran was. There was the Cliftonville Crusaders game that was very tetchy. You guys are playing now second 0-0 against Linfield. It's played out in some places, unless it gets kicked wide open early. It's a very tetchy game. It's almost what we would criticise the Premier League big games have been like for a long time. Not that we're going to go down that way, but I looked at that because, like I said, Glentoran, they've got 2 games in hand, but Glentoran are 10 points away. You guys, of Lawrence, of course, at the top right now. You guys are 8 on level games. But you've touched on exactly what I wanted to get into. What are they going to put themselves out? Because yes, Linfield had their poor start to the season, but actually Linfield had loads of draws last season as well, and that was against a variety of teams in the league. And that's why when I look at the other teams like Crusaders, and I think, actually, if they can do what they did on Saturday and beat Carrick, which they didn't do the last time they went to Taylor's Avenue, actually, who is going to be the favourite? Because Glentoran went on a good run right now, and they're in the doldrums. And even you look at Cliftonville. Cliftonville were able to turn over Lawrence. They haven't lost many games at home in over a year. They've only played 3 home games against top 6 sides so far this season. So it was just interesting to see what will happen, because Linfield staying strong and not losing a lot of those games might seem like, well, that's a good way to solidify things. But actually, if you're constantly sharing the spoils, the wins are potentially things that will throw you up. And that's maybe why Lawrence, that's the difference that Lawrence has up at the top. But to just reflect on some of the games that did happen, there's a lot that's went on even in the first few days of January. I was at the game where Crusaders took care of business against a depleted Carrick Rangers side. They have had it really tough going, not even in the past few weeks. I think going all the way to October, even late September, because they've had injuries. They've had some of their experienced players like Zavalin and Irvin are out at the minute, and bar 2 wins against Portadown and a win against Dungannon, they haven't really been getting results. In fact, the other result really seems to have been that game against Crusaders earlier in the season. But for Crusaders, they were classy. They were so direct with their play. It looked as though they were going to score from every time they got the ball forward. They break so well. They're similar in ilk to Coleraine, which is why I think that's such an interesting matchup. But Crusaders have definitely been looked at as the opposite to the likes of yourselves and Glentoran. They don't have the squad, but my goodness, do they have the starting 11. They haven't got Kennedy back, but they've got Haitley back. Billy Joe Burns is got a bit of health, and they had pretty much a full strength side against Carrick Rangers, and they showed what they can do. If they can keep going away from home, clearly that'll help them as a part of this title charge. I think a lot of people were waiting for them to fall away at this point, but they're not. They're there. And as that little graphic that I put up shows, that table, they're beating the big teams. So you cannot count them out.
Do you know what? When you just start talking about the Crusaders there, I'm looking at the table and they're like 3 points behind Larne. It's my impression that Crusaders have very much gone onto the radar here. That very few people, I should say, have mentioned them in regards to making a title challenge or challenging in any way. It's all Larne or Cliftonville or Linfield. And that obviously suits Stephen Baxter and Crusaders right down to the ground, because that will buy into their psyche. You know, it's like everybody kind of against them and everything else. And as you rightly say, it's getting players back for them, because Coleraine played them a number of weeks ago, and I think they were missing 8 or 9 big players. And I mean, Stephen Baxter at the end, you know, he fair play to him. He said it's not an excuse. I'm not making excuses, but we are missing players, and you could tell it. You could see it that night, because they were just down on bodies. They were down on quality players, and that told. So if you can start filtering in the likes of Paul Heatley again, Jordan Owens, eventually Ben Kennedy, etc., they'll not be far away. They've been there, they've done it, they know what it takes to get over the line, and I certainly would not be surprised to see them in the mix come the end of the season.
And for a team that hasn't been able to win back-to-back games since October, it says that that's probably why, because they see them get a result and then they falter the next week and they drop off to the likes of Ballymena, or they get turned over in that dramatic way against Carrick. I can only judge from what I can see with my own eyes. I really like Crusaders. In fact, I think the fact that they only have 17 games to go says it all. That they want as little games as possible, because I think they'll be able to sit tight, and Seaview is their home. No one's getting joy there. I know people talk about home field advantage. Right now, Seaview is the hardest place to go anywhere. And if they can stop the leakage against the bottom teams, and particularly away from home, and maybe just draw those games against the teams away from home, would be one of my favourites. But talking about a team who aren't able to get a win after a win, a team that even when they lose in dramatic fashion, they seem to just forget about it straight away. Cliftonville never seem to falter. They have these big losses, but then they snap straight back out of it. They forget about it. Don't worry about it. It's gone. And at home, 1-0 down against Lawlor, who are trying to get themselves out of their own mini rut. You're thinking, this is the time after the loss against Crusaders on Boxing Day. Are they going to be the next team to falter? But they snap back. They have real skill and quality, and now everybody's talking about young Sean Moore. Another fantastic player coming through there at Cliftonville. I know everybody can't win the league, but as statements of intent, as a big stage, a big puffing your chest out in those top six side meetings, as we were talking about there, that will be a big factor in where the Gibson Cup goes, because they could have faltered and let that game peter out at home on a very cold January 2nd day, but they fought back. That's what it's all about. Oh, the drama in this league.
It is exactly what it's all about. And I think where Cliftonville score heavily, ironically, is in their attacking options. Any team that has the sort of depth of forward talent, like the Hale brothers, Joe Gormley, Ryan Curran, Sean Moore, you've just mentioned, Jamie McDonough, you're always going to have a chance. And any game that you played, you're going to have a chance when you have firepower like that. And I think it's like what you're saying. Yes, they lost on Boxing Day, but with forward players like that, I think you go into any game in the knowledge that you'll score goals, and it's just a matter of then trying to keep them out at the other end, and you've always got a live chance in every game, and so it proved, as you said, against Lawrence.
This split is going to be frenetic, because it's about sticking around so that you can have these big cup finals. And a team that looked as though they were ready to put this league to bed by Christmas now have had one of the poorest runs of any top team I've seen in years. We've went from one of the most impressive teams I've ever seen in this league, not conceding a goal in close to 10 hours of football. They dispatch everybody. They have the best player in the league. They've got the deepest squad. They bash Linfield in their own backyard. They looked unstoppable. What was the amount of points that they had? And now, based on the form table, they're bottom of the league when it comes to the past 8-10 games. Unbelievable. I know McMenamin has been a massive factor, but it's mind-boggling, isn't it? Because these players have not completely... This isn't Space Jam. No one's stolen their powers overnight. They still are quality full-time footballers. But the chemistry, and I've talked about it a few times, the makeup of the team, be it how they set themselves out, it's not mixing. And you thought there they've had some big games, it doesn't go their way. But losing to Ballymena away from home, Ballymena have great quality players, absolutely. But that's so concerning. That's the first moment where people are starting to think, are Glentoran out of this title race?
Do you know, like, I know Glentoran are on a very poor run, and I actually kind of half casually joked with the guys when I was at the Linfield match on Monday, and I kind of sort of half fancied Ballymena to beat Glentoran, because that's kind of what the two teams are like. Ballymena are capable of doing that, as are Glentoran capable of losing to Ballymena. Right. Glentoran are in the most miserable run, as you say, and it's looking from the outside in. It looks like a very sort of unhappy camp at the moment. Just between one thing and another, it just seems to be that there's discontent among the supporters. There seems to be unhappiness there. They just don't really seem to know where they're going. But all that said, Peter, and I'm sitting looking at the table, and the two games in hand, and I know it doesn't really count for an awful lot. If they happen to do win those two, I mean, there would be 4 points behind the leaders.
They are not out of it. That's the thing about it. They are.
People can get carried away and write Glentoran off and say, oh, they're this and they're that. If they happen to win those two games, they're 4 points off the lead and back in the mix. And once they get Niall again, then they'll be even better.
It's fascinating. It's so fascinating, because it's been such a topsy-turvy season for them, and it's why I big up Coleraine, and I'm bigging up what I've seen from Crusaders and even Cliftonville as well, that you can see at this level, confidence can often be everything. Yes, Glentoran are probably the biggest lightning rod in that sense, where when they're feeling themselves, they look indestructible, and when they are down in the dumps, they can barely get themselves out for the second half. You know, it's just that type of thing. And I watched back the extended highlights, and it's not like this was a snatch and grab by Ballymena. I don't think they dominated the game, but this Glentoran looked everything they weren't at the start of the season, and I can see why they're going for Niall McGinn. I've talked about it before. I think it is you lose bodies, but you lose bodies in key positions in regards to they just were doing better when they were able to hurt you more wide, and they don't have that same kind of width up top. But give it to Ballymena. That's a brilliant result. Slightly frustrating for their fans, I'm sure, when they're thinking this is a great result against the Crews, great result against yourselves earlier on in the season at home, but then you lose to Portadown, and you split a double header against Newry. Inconsistency is clearly a thing that comes with this league on that level, and inconsistency spells mid-table, but they'll be a team that will feel as though new year, new me, let's start again, refocus and go ahead. And if there is a team that is quite literally embodying the new year, new me, it's Portadown. Do Dundela have any players left? Coleraine stole one. Portadown, I've been eyeing them up for weeks, seemingly. They signed 5 players on the 1st of January. Niall Curry had made no secret he was going to bring a load of bodies in. 3 of them started, 4 of them played, and it's a big game against Dungannon at the bottom of the table. I think it's actually probably one of the biggest games of that weekend, albeit there was the massive ones at the top of the table, because if Dungannon was to win that game, doesn't matter if Portadown get the points back from Newry, they looked almost out. But they get a draw. I think both teams will feel as though they could have nicked it, but it's disappointing. Both managers come out not getting the points, but particularly for Portadown, it's live to fight another day.
Do you give Portadown any chance of staying in this league, or is it a case almost now of competing in the rest of the season, but also almost having one eye on next season, maybe in the championship as well? Or is it too early to say that?
I have covered a lot of Portadown games over the past, year and a bit that I've been doing a lot of coverage on the league, and I joked at the start of this year in particular that Portadown were genuinely contenders to rank as the worst team this 12-team version of the league has ever seen from a points point of view. They made the change, and they clearly have had good results. Not all that have counted, it's fair to say, but They changed their shape, and they now talked about how it was square pegs and round holes. He seems to have got a few rounder pegs in the shape of Chris Rogers to go in at the back, Lee Chapman to play out wide, Carfield's a striker that's come in from them, and there's plenty of games against the bottom sides. Same for, I guess, other bottom sides. Dungannon against Newry, and look, Dungannon got more breathing room because they were able to beat Newry on Boxing Day. Newry, who looked as though they were home and hosed, don't look as home and hosed anymore, particularly for that 11th place. I would have said maybe 2 months ago they're gone. Just because they've played so much better, I don't think it's completely done just yet. But a bit opposite to the Crusaders thing, even though there's 17 games or so, they are running out of games.
Niall Curry, Portadown manager, very, very experienced manager,
for sure.
Very acute operator, knows the league, knows football inside out. Very, very personable guy, even just as a person, has really recruited well. As you said, he's got Cara Freeland from Coleraine on loan. Obviously, Aaron Canning, formerly of this parish as well, has moved there. That will strengthen up your defence. And in a lot of ways, like to that, you mentioned earlier, looking forward to when the split comes and those games between the top 6 teams with everything on the line. It'll be the same in the bottom 6 as well. You think about it, if Portadown are still anyway close to Dungannon and Newry, and then they're playing each other in those final few games of the season, and if Portadown have any glimmer of hope, where there's games, there's hope, isn't there, Peter? And football's a funny game, and 1 or 2 different results here and there, and all of a sudden, table looks a lot different, and momentum is key, isn't it?
It is, and I, funny enough, asked the question to a few Dungannon people on Boxing Day. At this stage, would you want the Ports to get the points back? Because clearly that's under review. And I didn't really get a key answer right then. They clearly see, right now, keep Portadown as far away as possible, and then let's begin to dream about catching up with Newry. That's clearly in play now, with it being only 4 points. But if you were, yes, Dungannon have played 2 more games, and Portadown played 2 more games than Newry, but if you were to take those 3 points back from Newry, put it to Portadown have 8, Dungannon have 14, Newry would have 15. Let's say there was to be another win for Portadown, another loss for Newry, with that 8, 11 and 15. It's not that far away. So it is all to play for, but look, Portadown haven't really got results against anybody. I saw Dungannon against Newry on Boxing Day, and I thought they were very impressive, and I think a bit they're like the Crusaders of the bottom 6, really good at home and have really nice attacking play, sometimes just can't nail it. And really, Dungannon should be a fantastic counter-attacking team, but they aren't there with it just yet, and probably are a lot better a team than what their points say. But in turn, I've seen some very poor performances from them as well. And right now, I think the next 3-4 weeks will be key, because we lose 3 more off the docket, and then we'll start to see what could really happen. As we said at the start of the podcast, the little ticker, the ball dropped in New York, the timer hit in London, Big Ben chimed, all those things. We all sang Auld Lang Syne. I think it sounds a lot like a football chant. Every year I do it, I have to stop myself chanting my team's colours or something. It's just in my head.
Insert team, yes.
Insert team, and but with that, it meant as though players are coming and going, and we've had a few happening already. I have somewhat bigged this up as the biggest and the most impactful and potentially the most dramatic January transfer window we've ever had in the league, because there's so many teams that are potentially up for winning the league. The ability to progress your team. If you come first, is bigger than ever with the Champions League, Little Champions path, as well with the Europa Conference League. Oh yeah, that's the name of it. That being a bit more open to teams at our level, it's just really important to get up there. And we've also seen teams at the bottom, which is probably where I should start, trying to mix it and keep themselves in this league. And there's nowhere else to start, really, bar Portadown. Niall Curry doing Niall Curry things. He's brought in Aaron Canning, technically from Coleraine, I guess, from his previous time there. Of course, he's been with Dungannon and a few other places. Really experienced defender. Lee Chapman, Chris Rogers, and Owen McCall all come from Dundela. Lee Chapman is a wide defender, kind of a wing-back real player. Chris Rogers plays in the centre. Owen McCall is a centre midfielder. And they've also brought in Cather Frail up top. They've let a few go, and they've also put a few on the transfer list. Talking about the Dundela exodus, because Coleraine have dipped their fingers in and they've taken in the very promising young forward player, Eamon Fife. I would describe him as somewhat of a wide forward rather than a striker or a winger. Where do you see him come in? Because the much hype and the much lauded early heroics of Evan McLaughlin are now gone. He's went back to Derry City. Is that where Fife's going to play? Is that his place? The fourth choice or third choice to come off the bench player to play either side of Shevlin, or is he potentially a Shevlin replacement when we get the 80 minutes?
That's a lot to think about there. I think, judging from what Oren says about him, and I'm sure Eamon Fife, the player himself, I think he did say, in fact, in his welcome video when he joined Coleraine, that he's still very raw. So I think he's 24. He has obviously played football when he was younger, and then he latterly played with Dundela. I think he's also a very talented Gaelic player with Antrim as well, but now I think concentrating on the soccer. I think from what Oren's saying, I think he's bringing him in, and he understands that he's raw, but there's a player there. So I think in many ways it'll be a bit of a project, long-term project for Oren. Probably in much the same way as like a Matthew Shevlin, for example. I mean, Matthew came from Linfield. He had been at Ballymena, he had been at Linfield, didn't do particularly well at the Blues, came to Coleraine, took him a little bit of time, but Oren worked with him, as did the rest of the coaching team, obviously. And now what you have is a very, very talented Irish league striker that's able to do all of what's required: hold the ball up, score goals, lead the line, work hard, etc. And I think Oren probably sees the similar potential with Eamon Fife insofar as he can maybe mold him into a player. Certainly we got a glimpse of him against Linfield. He came on as a substitute, actually had Corain's only effort on goal, which Chris John saved. It was a free kick. He's a noted free kick expert, so we were all hoping that he was going to come on, make this dramatic introduction, step on with 10 minutes remaining, take a free kick, score the winner, and everybody would have, hailed him as a hero. But in terms of where he's going to fit in, I think it's a case of biding his time. Matthew Shevlin's the number one striker. Then you've got Michael McCrudden, who's probably the number two. And if Matthew Shevlin needs replaced and substituted, it'll be him. But who knows? Who knows what might happen? Eamon Fife may come in and may hit the ground running. He's probably a young guy, lots of confidence, nothing to fear. He's very, very strong, very athletic. Who knows? He could be a player that could come in and make an impact straight away, and then it'd be very difficult to try and leave him out. He may get himself a place in the starting 11. Who knows? That's the beauty about it.
Coleraine once again.
Listen, Oren has us media guys up here, well trained, let me tell you.
Well, we talk about Dundela. If 4 wasn't enough, we could be almost 6 if talk is to be believed. I'm just reporting what other people are saying, not confirming or well, just not confirming what they're saying. Potentially, the young teenage wide defender McKay could also be going to one of the big teams. Risa Net, one of the top 10 goal scorers in the league, another teenager. I'm talking about the championship, another teenager there. Super nippy as well. He could potentially on the radar of a few of the big Belfast teams. Oh, just not going well for Dundela. They even lose their manager this year. Elsewhere, though, we see Robbie McVarnock go from Newington up to Ballymena. Meanwhile, Ballymena have players that are queuing up at the exit door. We have striker Parkhouse, who is being put on the transfer list. We also have Keelan Loughran, defender, also being put on the transfer list. And one which they pretty much said they did not want to do, but at the own player's request, Connor Keeley has requested his own transfer away from Ballymena. He said it's to do with travel, it's to be closer to work and home. That would be a big blow for them.
That would be a massive blow, because I've seen Ballymena on a few occasions, and Connor Keeley is a mainstay of that Ballymena side. To lose a player of that stature, not only is he a good player, but stature, physically, he's a big player, and that counts for a lot.
He's the big lad at the back.
And that counts for an awful lot. If you're a big lad at the back or a big lad up front, those things still matter in football. I don't care what way we play the game, but those things still matter.
He doesn't get enough recognition because he is a Ballymena player, but he is, the best way to describe him is he's that big defender that you look at when you play Ballymena and go, who's that boy? That looks good. He looks good. And he is. He's great. And he will probably potentially move to a big team in the League of Ireland. It is that time, remember, where their season starts to build up as ours are in the middle. So we can see some players come up, come down, talking about teams in the League of Ireland. Well, Evan McLaughlin has returned to Derry, so has Micheál Glynn, although it might not be for that long. Glenavon wanted to make it clear that he is returning early from his year-long loan, which had been agreed. If you don't know who Micheál Glynn is, he is a rapid wing-back, plays on that left-hand side, an area which Glenavon are really struggling for. He was on loan from Derry, brilliant going forward. Tidy enough at the back, but it really catches the eye when he goes forward. And Mark McIntosh online has been tweeting that he's brought back to Derry with the potential idea that he may be brought in by another Irish League team. Need a fullback up in Coleraine, do you?
You're fishing here, aren't you? Yeah. Listen, I was talking. We were reporters and just hearing the conversation between Oran and David Healy on Monday. And we asked both managers about transfers, and they were obviously both very guarded in what they said. But, I mean, Oran was basically saying that, yes, they would love to do business, but as often is the case, there's very, very little there. And he goes, whatever there is there, people are looking big, serious money for players. And that is maybe why, Peter, that you're seeing clubs looking towards the championship for players. Because maybe the players, for a start, aren't there. Premiership clubs at the top don't want to let their good players leave, and particularly don't want them to go to a rival club. So they're not going to be there. Bottom six teams probably want to keep their players to try and safeguard their own place in the Premiership. So really and truly, there's not an awful lot there unless you're looking at bringing somebody in from down south or from the Championship. And it's happened before, and maybe particularly more in the summer in terms of a transfer window. And Oran keeps saying to us as well, it's almost like a game of dominoes. You have to wait for one move to be made, and then that has a knock-on effect. So if a player leaves a certain club and goes to another club, then other players become available as a result. And it just seems at the minute there's a bit of an impasse that nobody's really wanting to make any kind of moves. So as often is the case in these things, it's like about holding your nerve almost, isn't it? And just trying to find a wee nugget somewhere that nobody else has seen, or like what Coleraine are hoping to do with an Eamon Fife. They've done it in the past. They've brought players through from junior league football in Coleraine. Owen Bradley was a perfectly good illustration. He was playing for Coleraine, Ballymoney United. Owen took a punt on him, and he's enjoyed a stellar Irish League career on the back of it.
Well, you talk about those gems. Clearly, they're not growing on trees out there. You look at Joe Gormley, and you also have to highlight Lee Bonus. And that brings me to the point of, well, potentially Rotherham are interested in quotes of £300,000 being bandied about. And that's kind of where we are. We'll have to see what happens there. Players that could come back, well, is that Niall McGinn on the horizon? Because the talk now is that his time at the Scottish Championship side Dundee is over, and that Glentoran are interested. We pumped up, at least I did, the need for filling up top wide positions. Even at his advanced years, that would be a marquee signing for Glentoran. Players of this ilk haven't always worked out. I'm thinking Paddy McCourt. I'm thinking Keith Gillespie. I'm thinking Nacho Novo, which I still can't believe actually happened. But McGinn coming to Glentoran should make them more competitive, surely. He's still playing for Northern Ireland as of a few months ago.
Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? I mean,
it is.
To me, it just seems, I'm just thinking to myself, is that really what Glentoran need at this minute in time? Is to bring in another big player, put them in a squad that's not particularly performing well at this minute in time? I don't know. Maybe it may be the spark that reignites their season. I just wonder sometimes when you bring high profile players in, and how does that then work with the equilibrium among the squad that's already there? But on the other side, Niall McGinn started in the Irish League. He knows the league. It's not like he's just had a career in England and Scotland and he's just coming back just to see out his days here. He obviously played at Dungannon, Derry City. He knows the leagues here very, very well in the standard. So, and maybe it is something that he wants to do. Maybe he wants to come back, finish his career here. And I read somewhere, I think that he's interested in going down the coaching role as well. So maybe he's looking at playing out his days here, maybe enrolling in coaching courses or developing that within a Northern Ireland structure. So it remains to be seen. I mean, who am I to tell Glentoran what to do? I mean, they want to say now again, work away. That's what I say.
That's it. I think it's slightly in the midst of Glentoran need to turn around their season. You know, I think that's where this all gets confused. If Glentoran is sitting second or third, you're like, okay, bring in someone very experienced, a high quality professional player, comes in, could be a great influence in the dressing room, looking to move on towards coaching. I'm sure Glentoran, if you told them 6 months ago Niall McGinn would be a coach at your club within 6 months to a year, they would go, absolutely. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Quickly though as well, you talked about the Championship. One player who will not be going from the Championship up to the Premier League, at least for now, is one Adam Sally, who pretty much said, Portadown, thanks, but no thanks. I would not like to come back to Portadown. So I've talked in this podcast before about how it looks as though Portadown are going to recall him, and they could recall him. Portadown have said it is not going to happen. But before we get into looking ahead to next week, this is a story for me which actually was highlighted on the podcast by Gareth McCullough, but is going to run. And he said it again in the past week, and it definitely has to be talked about it. For me, one of the biggest quotes, one of the biggest statements that I've heard all year. Chief Executive of the Northern Ireland Football League, Gerard Lawlor, tells the BBC that he hopes that the Irish Premiership could be fully professional within 5 years. It's not a demand, it's not a rule, it's not an obligation, it's a hope, it's a belief, it's a candle in the wind. He would love it to be the case. He says he wants to start planning for the clubs who aren't full-time. It's going to be in the back of my mind if I ever talk to any managers about this. How could this happen? Is it a possibility? Is it a chance? I agree with the statements he made about how the league is night and day from 8 years ago. I think we really forget about that, how massively it's changed. I think clearly grounds are a big thing that needs to be looked at yesterday, but that's a separate story altogether. I look at that and I go, right, we have 3 full-time teams. I don't know what the full-time status of Crusaders is. Full-time teams are Glentoran, Linfield, and Lawrence. The Crusaders status is 3/4, which either people, I don't get a full answer. It either means 3/4 of their team are full-time, or they are full-time 3/4 of the
Quarters.
week. Okay, we're gonna go with that, which is kind of like half full 4-day week, let's call it full-time, and not technically, just metaphorically. So then the next on the list clearly is Coleraine, Cliftonville. Are they close? Not saying you're having a hoke at the books, but it feels to me that Coleraine are a full-time team in all but how much they train.
Well, I'll tell you now. I think I've said this previously. As you probably may be aware, Coleraine Football Club have applied for a share of the levelling up funding. The government's levelling up funding, right? So their plan is to make a Northwest Regional Stadium,
which is through Parliament. This is not through Stormont or local executive. That's directly from the Westminster government.
They have applied for £16 million. Now, that £16 million is going to completely transform the showgrounds. It's going to be a centre for the Northwest, for football, for everything else, right? And I've said this before, if Coleraine get the money that they've applied for, and the decision was meant to be announced before Christmas, is now being delayed into the new year, and hopefully they get a positive answer. If they get the £16 million, they will transform a club. It will be a club unrecognisable from what it is now. And if that happens, you're talking a period of 3, 4, 5 years, possibly, to get the whole thing done. And I'd probably tell you now, Peter, if that goes ahead, and if they do the stadium, and all things being equal, and they're still competitive on the pitch, Gerard Lawlor's still, wanting teams to go full time, I would say at that point, only my personal opinion, I would say there's a very strong possibility that at that point, Coleraine Football Club may look to go full-time professional, because they would have the facilities, they would have everything in place, and to me the next natural step would be on the pitch, where the team would become professional. And that's only my opinion, but I could see that happening.
You guys are raking in 3,000 average attendance. It's incredible. There was a graphic by Mr. Marshall, Mr. NI Stats, and it highlighted the attendance in League of Ireland against Irish League. Some people took those stats a wee bit too literally, in the fact that, look, I don't want to throw cold water on that. We have some bigger teams, some smaller teams in this league, but the League of Ireland, yes, they have some really big teams. Clearly, some big Dublin teams, Shamrock Rovers, right at the top of that list, all right? But there's only 10 teams in that league, and the smallest teams were UCD, still UCD actually, and was Finn Harps. But absolutely, Coleraine, especially Linfield and Glentoran, and the likes of Lawrence currently, and Crusaders, they are just as big, just a wee bit shy of your other teams in there. Your Dundalks, your Sligo's, they are, in fact, Coleraine are probably bigger than the odd League of Ireland team as well. And if you were to add in the fact that instead of playing against some teams in this Irish League where maybe they are only bringing 50 fans, the lowest amount of attended fans is going to be maybe 400 or something? Massive difference. Huge potential. That's a complete mooted point. I'm just saying, attendance-wise, it's really shooting up in this league. And 3,000, that you're a League 2 team there. You've even more potential with even better facilities.
Well, that's the thing. You think of the facilities such as they are at the moment, they're not great, let's be honest. I mean, it's through nobody's fault. It's just a tired stadium. If the plans go through and you've got a new stand on the far side with classrooms, physio, changing rooms, and then the near stand, the Jack Doherty stand, new corporate facilities, bars, restaurants, clean environment, you can imagine those crowds will just go up and up, Peter, if the team continues to perform well on the field. And that's where you're looking then.
Well, we've seen it in It's completely different sports, it's completely different culture, but local sport is something we're passionate about in this country. You see it in GAA, and I think there's a lot to learn from that sport. I am not claiming I have any secrets of that area, but it definitely comes in facilities, and it's integrating entertainment with the football, with the community aspects of it. It's a clear thing that works. But on what I was saying, yes, it looks a little leap for likes of Coleraine and Cliftonville, who many would say Cliftonville are working almost as hard as some of those full-time teams in the evenings. But we go to, on Boxing Day, it was Dungannon against Newry, and right now the attendance I can see is 400. That is not an attendance that can support a full-time team.
Yeah. No, I mean,
and I'm not here to lambast the idea.
No,
but that is a big gap, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And like we all know, that there are teams that are well supported, and there are teams in the league which, for no fault of their own, aren't so well supported. I mean, on the same day, Boxing Day, I think we had a full house at Coleraine, Ballymena. New Year's Day, Coleraine took 900 to Linfield on Monday. And Oren made reference to that himself. So there's massive potential there. But I understand what you're saying. It's how do you square that circle, right? Because you've got a league in place now. So, and already, Peter, that there's a gap in that league. There's the top six and there's the bottom six, and there's a bit of a gap there between them. And that's only going to increase if the top six, if, for example's sake, become full-time professional and the others can't afford it or whatever. So where does that leave the league then? Are we then the next natural progression from there? And I'm sure the people that are in higher powers than me, I suppose the next step is again that old thing, the Chestnut All Ireland League.
We're not even getting into the summer aspect and those things. He talked about, and I'm not here to criticize what he said, I just think it's talking points. He talked about the 12 team. Going any smaller feels like it would just make the league a wee bit too intense. It would take a lot of the character out of the league. But in turn, I don't see us ever even sneaking above 12, even though losing a Portadown and potentially, and having an Ards out of the league is less than ideal, you would say. It's just going to be interesting because we don't have a wage cap at the minute. And it's that balance, isn't it? Because we've seen the drama. It's not like the League of Ireland has been a picture of stability. We've seen the sporting fingals. So I'm enthused by the ambition. I am. I really like the idea of we're going to try it, we're going to push, and we would love to aim there. It'll just be about what are those things that are being talked about, the helping, the framework, the assistance. Are we assisting these teams to pump up? It's wow. Would it be amazing if we're sitting here 5 years from now and we're even sitting with 6 or 8 teams that are full time? It would be brilliant, because regardless if you liked or loathed the talk of the All Ireland League, if you ever saw the full proposal, that proposal that I read through a few years ago had such ambitious plans. How we had the growth, we had the potential, we had the fan base. Like Belfast is like one of the highest selling places for Man United shirts, like in the UK and the world. It's crazy, and how that could then transfer across. And one of the things they highlighted was with full-time football, you would see what we're seeing now, players transfer over. So we're seeing it in effect very slightly. You're seeing players coming from the League of Ireland, you're seeing players coming over from England who are saying, I'm not going to go for lower Scottish League, I'm going to go for top Irish League. And one of the things they highlighted is that your legendary players would come back. McGinn is the clear one. Yes, we've had Keith Gillespie and Paddy McCourt and whatever. But it always did struck me that David Healy never played in the league. Damian Duff played in the League of Ireland at the end, and you see players come back to play there, even for a season or two. And I think that's something we may see more. I think you're even seeing it with the likes of Joel Cooper coming back and giving it a go again. That's what the ambition is. Full time creates a different league for sure.
Well, do you know what? At the very least, and it ain't going to hurt anybody to discuss things, to talk about it, to throw ideas out there. It never did anybody any harm. Doesn't mean to say it's all going to happen or it's going to come true or whatever else. But certainly, healthy debate, always to be encouraged, because who knows what comes out of it.
And we're going to definitely talk about it plenty as we go along here.
We'll always do that.
It's the big fun day this Saturday. It's Irish Cup weekend. Some people are probably saying, well, there's been plenty of Irish Cup weekends, as we're back to round 5, which to other people is like the FA Cup third round. Last year it was round 1 again, but now it's back to round 5.
I think fifth round sounds better.
Fifth round sounds better. We're firing all the big teams and we go through it all. So we don't have any big mega clashes. You probably have the likes of Carrick against Ballymena, maybe Linfield against Warren Point as the top big, whatever you would call it. If you added their current place in the pyramid together, it would be the smallest number. Dungannon against Ards looks a bit fun. But looking through it all, we've talked a lot about Coleraine. Coleraine have Lawlor. I would have thought Lawlor had a better chance a few weeks ago. Right now, they're skating on ice themselves.
Yes.
But that'll be tricky enough.
Yeah, it will be. And obviously they were beaten at the weekend in their last outing. And when Owen heard that on Monday, he wasn't too happy, because obviously a beaten team is going to come with a little bit more incentive. Not that they probably need it in a fifth round of an Irish Cup away at Coleraine. Listen, nobody at Coleraine is under any misapprehension or illusion about how difficult Saturday's game is going to be. Lawlor at top of the championship. Very, very competitive league. They're obviously there at the top on merit. They've got a host of players with Irish league experience. If you look through their ranks, obviously Nettis.
You'll remember Nettis McAlesh?
Yeah, he was here for a period of time at Coleraine. Did well. Unfortunately, probably there were maybe other people further up the pecking order at that particular time. And being a young lad, he wanted to play football. He wanted to go elsewhere to get regular football. Nobody could blame him for that. But we all know how good Nettis is. Stephen O'Donnell, the Coleraine captain, was talking about him post-match on Monday. Spoke about Nettis and about how dangerous he can be. He's a real threat. And listen, Lawlor will come to Coleraine full of confidence, given their league position. They're used to winning games. I was looking there recently. They win an awful lot of games. They score a lot of goals. I'm not going to patronise them and say, oh, it's a big day out for them, because that's I'm sure that would not be Dean Smith's message to his players. They'll be coming and they'll be wanting to take a big scalp. And Coleraine at this moment in time in Irish League football is a big scalp. Owen, talking about the game after winning or after drawing with Linfield on Monday, basically said it's a matter to get his players, get their mindset right, to start the game properly, and obviously don't give Lawlor any encouragement at all, and try to be as thoroughly professional as possible. And touch wood, and Coleraine have had reasonable success in cup competitions over the last 4 or 5 years, and they kind of know what it takes now to try to get through rounds. So with all that in mind, hopefully their experience, home advantage, maybe counts on Saturday and get through into the sixth round and hopefully a decent draw.
All eyes will be there. That could be a tasty 1-0 going into the last 20 minutes. Other games that are there, we'll not go through them all. Dundela, Cliftonville. Hopefully Dundela will have enough players to play that game after all the ones that are currently missing. That would have been so tasty after their big result against Crusaders in was it the League Cup or the County Antrim Shield? I forget now. But that was a big result for them. That was a big scalp. They welcome Cliftonville down to Wilgar Park. Crusaders take on Dergview at home. That would be one of those things you would circle, but ultimately at home at Seaview.
I think home advantage, yeah.
That's a big old trek from Castledurg for Dergview, but keep an eye on that one. Newry against the Welders, Baldamallard against Glenavon. Again, down at Baldamallard. Glenavon haven't played for whatever it is, 2 weeks since Boxing Day.
Potential.
That's got potential there. Carrick Rangers against Ballymena, Institute against Theana, Portadown against Banbridge Town. You look at that because Portadown are bottom of the league, but they look to have a bit more confidence. But Banbridge Town, just down the road, you never know. That would be a big scalp there. Lawrence against Crumlin United, that's a massive gap. Knockbreda against St Mary's YC of Portadown. Wow. I'm going to go to that game. That could be a massive scalp from the level that St Mary's are at. Knockbreda are still a championship team. I know they're near the bottom of it, but that would be such a story at the level.
That's a proper cup team, or proper cup game there, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm going to have to go through all the teams St Mary's have already dispatched. Bangor against Tandragee Rovers. Look, Bangor are down in the Premier Intermediate, but wow. Like, that would be an incredible result for Tandragee Rovers. Again, very low down in the pyramid themselves. Newington against Ballymoney United. Not a shocker, but just feels like a great cup game. We've talked about Coleraine Lockall. Ballyclare against Dollingstown. Again, it'd be a big result for Dollingstown. Ballyclare, just that team that seems to keep around the championship and has plenty of old pros and keep the motor running. Ards would want to get a massive scalp against the Swifts. And then, albeit that's at home, and then Warren Point go to the Blues. Really looking forward to that. It's one of my favourite days just from a radio point of view, because they're just pinging about here, there, and everywhere. But I'm just looking forward to seeing how the rest of this season goes. I'm sure you will as well. If you've enjoyed this fine man, Mr. Damian Mullan, and you like the things he says, the things he thinks, and all those stuff, you can, of course, grab a little copy of the Coleraine Chronicle. You can find his writings. He posts online little snippets of his work. You can also hear him chat on the Coleraine podcast.
Well, yes, you can indeed. I think we will be recording tomorrow. I think we may have our new signing, Eamon Fife, maybe lined up for a bit of a chat on our podcast tomorrow. Myself, Jonathan McNabb, maybe get him in and we'll talk a little bit to him just about how he's found it in his first week in his new job, as it were.
Happy days. Well, you've got lots of episodes there. You've got ex-players. I really enjoyed your one with Grant Cameron. You know, there's a man with an incredible amount of broadcasting experience in this country. And no, it's really been fantastic to chat to you. Where can people find your stuff online? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, just all the usual places, Peter, Spotify and online. And as you said, the paper, Twitter, Facebook, etc., you know, so all the usual.
Incredible. Suspects. Been an absolute delight. I'm really looking forward to hopefully chatting to you again very soon.
Well, Peter, thank you very much for the kind invite. Great to have a chat with you as well. Hopefully, as you say, we'll be back on again, and fingers crossed. We'll see what the second half of the season brings, Peter. Us Coleraine boys will remain coy, and we'll just see how things pan out.
Bing bang bosh, another one bites the dust. I don't know why. I don't think podcasts bite the dust afterwards, so you can listen to them forever if you want. The person that decided to go to the very start over Christmas and go bit by bit through the episodes, that's nice. I was wondering why they were getting little listens. I hope you had a little time going for a run or whatever you're doing, and you're probably caught up to this episode if you decided to stick it around. So hello, it's probably April in your world. It's January now, and if there's transfers that happen, I'll try and stick it up on Twitter. Oh, you can follow me on Twitter. Facebook, Instagram. Also, if you've got a new smart speaker, you can say, hey, smart speaker, or whatever voice they have. Play Kick a Match, an Irish League podcast. I'm going to say goodbye. There's 16 games, which means you should go to at least one. Like, I'm sure if you fell into a field, you'd somehow see an Irish League game or an Irish Cup game happening somewhere. It's a fun weekend. We'll see the score. I will see you next week, as always. Thanks for listening. Tally ho. Bye bye.